Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Aisling O'Brien, Breifne O'Brien and Louise Hickey. We're going to start today with an issue that's been brewing for the last few months and which has caused significant concern for farm organisations and some politicians. That's the issue of VAT refunds for unregistered farmers. Confusion emerged late last year over what expenditure farmers could and could not receive a VAT refund for. Since then, there have been claims that Revenue has changed long-standing interpretations of the rules on this. Revenue denies it has changed its position on VAT refunds, but stakeholders and politicians don't seem convinced at the moment. Aisling, can you bring us up to speed on this?
Yes, Charles. So this is an issue that's been causing quite a lot of confusion and concern right across the agribusiness sector in recent months, because the impact of all this confusion about whether or not Revenue has changed its interpretation of this VAT refund order, which dates back to 1972, has filtered right the way through the system, because farmers are, wary of ordering maybe meal bins or calf feeders because they fear that they might not get the VAT refund. And that seems to be what is happening out there on the ground. So officials from the Revenue Commissioners were invited to appear before the joint Oireachtas Committee on Agriculture, Food and the Marine this week, where it can only be said there was quite a robust exchange between members and the officials from Revenue. So it has become an issue. Another member of the committee said that politicians' ears were being bent by farmers on this matter as well. Now, Chad Egan, he's a principal officer at the Office of the Revenue Commissioners. He told the committee that Revenue has not changed its interpretation of the law on the refund order. And in recent times, he said, Revenue's risk assessment process has identified ineligible claims on certain types of farm equipment which are outside the scope of the refund order. And he said, while farming equipment is not provided for under the order, equipment may be allowed where it's considered a fixture. So essentially where it's bolted down to the ground, Charles, is how he explained it. And he said that it's permanently installed in the farm building, and once installed, it cannot be removed without causing significant damage or destruction to the farm building or to the fixture itself. So that is why I suppose things like slurry bags and maybe automatic calf feeders, which could be moved, well, I suppose farmers might argue a very full slurry bag couldn't be moved very easily off farm. That's why they are now maybe falling foul of this Revenue interpretation. We heard from Chad Egan that claims which have been approved for a refund of VAT include water troughs that have been plumbed, meal bins which are over 10 tonne in size, cubicle mats that have been bolted to the floor, hydraulic scrapers, drafting gates, and new build milk parlours. So I suppose milk tanks that are being installed in an existing parlour don't qualify, but if they're part of an entire renovation and overhaul of the milking parlour, they will qualify for this VAT refund. And we heard that Revenue said that 96% of claims have been approved within the last 3 years, and they said that their approval rate has been quite consistent. There were over 37,000 claims for VAT refunds from unregistered farmers last year, with 88 million being paid out by Revenue. Now, Chad Egan did say that the concerns that have been raised by farm organisations in recent months are going to be taken into consideration as part of the process of Revenue reviewing and updating its guidance. And Revenue said that it would issue guidance to provide clarity to the farm sector on its website in the coming weeks, and it will continue to engage with both the Irish Farmers Association and the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, as it has been doing in recent weeks, on this matter as well. Now, members did voice concerns over the refunds and what farmers were telling them on the ground. And there was considerable discussion on the issue of meal bins and that qualifying criteria that they must be 10 tonnes or more. And Fine Gael Senator and dairy farmer Tim Lombard told the committee about a refund that he received for a meal bin about 20 years ago. Have a listen to this.
So the meal bins. Meal bins, a 10 tonne meal bin. 2002, I put in a meal bin for 3.5 tonne, bolted to the ground, put it up, got the VAT back in 6 weeks. Today, I would not get that done on the interpretation that's put before the Oireachtas that a 10 tonne meal bin, would only qualify. So is that a different interpretation, or was I wrong in 2002?
Well, I'm very happy to stand over that. There's been no change of interpretation. If we change our interpretation, we publish that.
So as you can hear there, Charles, Fine Gael Senator Tim Lombard is saying that he qualified for a VAT refund on a 3.5-tonne meal bin back in 2002 and questioning why that was allowed. And now similar meal bins aren't going to be allowed by Revenue. And he asked for Revenue to reassure farmers out there who might be concerned, maybe if in the recent past you had secured a refund on maybe something like a 3.5-tonne meal bin, and Revenue officials did tell the committee that they weren't going to be doing any reviews and looking back at past claims. They'd be looking to the future instead. And Independent Ireland TD Michael Fitzmaurice chimed in on this issue as well. And he said that Revenue restricting VAT refunds to meal bins over 10 tonnes actually discriminated against small farmers. Now, the Cathaoirleach of the committee, Deputy Jackie Cahill, he wanted to place on the official Oireachtas record at the end of the session that he and the committee were disappointed with the answers given by the Revenue representatives. He said it was crystal clear to them as politicians that the policy of Revenue has changed. You've categorically denied that this has happened, he said. You're perfectly entitled to do that. But he pointed to calf feeders being refundable without any question up to August of last year, and now calf feeders are being refused. That's the simple facts, he said, and that has to be a change in interpretation. He welcomed that Revenue was engaging with the farm organisations, but he did say that the committee were very unhappy that the officials had refused to accept that there was a change in Revenue's interpretation. And that's where things stayed, Charles. So we are hoping to get that update from Revenue in the coming weeks on that guidance, and hopefully the concerns that have been raised by farm organisations and members of the committee will be heeded by Revenue officials.
We're going to move on now, and we're coming up to that time of year when farmers have to finalise and submit their applications for the Basic Income Support for Sustainability, or BISS, the replacement for the BPS in this current cap. The deadline currently is May 15th, with the possibility of an extension, although Minister Charlie McConalogue has not given any indication at the moment anyway that he would extend the deadline. Aisling, as we approach that deadline next week, do we know how many farmers are yet to submit their applications?
Yeah, so the latest data that we have got confirmed from the department is up to Monday, May 6th. And by that date, 83,096 farmers had applied for their BISS payment and area-based schemes as well. So this means that an additional 19,000 applications were lodged with the department over the previous 7 days. The department had previously confirmed that just under 64,000 applications had been made by April 29th. So as you said, there is just under a week now, Charles, to the deadline. It's Wednesday, May 15th. It is a very important deadline. This is obviously one of the most important payments and one of the most important jobs you'll do on your farm during the entire year. So it's definitely not to be missed. And look, a lot of farmers would use maybe farm advisors to lodge their applications as well. And no doubt they're under an awful lot of pressure right around the country. And I'm sure that they wouldn't mind if there was an extension to that deadline. But as it stands, as we're recording right now, Charles, Wednesday, May 15th is the deadline for BISS. Last year, there was over 124,000 applications lodged with the department. So based on that figure, it means there's in or around 40,000 farmers yet to submit their scheme application. So as I said, a busy time for advisors and a busy time for the department's online system as well over the next few days as farmers get those applications in.
And there's also been some developments, Aisling, in the last week on other schemes as well, hasn't there?
Yeah, so this is in relation to SCEP, which of course is the Suppler Carbon Efficiency Programme. So Minister for Agriculture, Charlie McConalogue, has confirmed that there will be in-person training events for that scheme held later in the summer. At the end of April, the Minister confirmed that online training courses would take place, but concerns were raised by some farm organisations, most notably the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, that those maybe in an older age cohort and those living in areas with poor internet connections, I'm sure there's lots of people listening to us around the country who don't have broadband, don't even have a sniff of it yet, Charles, and trying to do online training would be too much of an ask for poor internet connections. And then they would be ineligible for the scheme and ineligible for payment or maybe get a penalty. So while saying that the online option has significant advantages for SCEP participants, Minister McConalogue acknowledged that for some farmers, online access could be problematic. And he said he didn't want to disenfranchise any farmer out there in relation to this important training. And he recognised that there are some SCEP participants who may not have adequate internet connectivity or support to access online training. So he said that they will be hosting, the department, a number of in-person SCEP training events later in the summer. And the expectation, he said, is that the online training would be preferential for the majority of participants because it is obviously available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for farmers out there. And the online option would allow farmers, whether they're full or part-time, to undertake the training at a date and a time that suits them best rather than having to attend a specific location on a specific day. And the training is split into 7 different modules, and a farmer can stop and start the training online as necessary, but it has to be completed by the 15th of November this year. So the department will be monitoring the uptake of SCEP training regularly and will issue targeted communications, we were told, to farmers who are participating in the scheme as well. So the online training is available through SCEPtraining.ie. That's the website that you need to know about. And I'm sure the department will be issuing more information about the in-person training events in due course as well. And we'll be keeping you up to date on Agriland for all of those dates that you'll need to know if you would prefer to do your training in person. Now, just before we leave the area of schemes, Charles, the Irish Natura and Hill Farmers Association confirmed this week that it has secured 2 changes to measures under the National Sheep Welfare Scheme. Those changes relate to the plunge dipping measure and to the clostridial vaccine measure, the farm organisation told us. And you can find out more about that on our website and our app if you are part of the sheep welfare scheme.
We're going to move over to dairy now. And milk processors are currently finalising their decisions on prices to be paid to farmers for April milk in what is a hugely important time for dairy farmers as they hit peak milk supply for the year. In the last week, Aisling, we've seen some potential signs of how dairy markets are faring internationally, which may offer some insight into what dairy farmers can expect. Can you update us on that?
Yeah, so I suppose before we talk about the Ornua PPI index and the GDT, the Global Dairy Trade latest auction as well in New Zealand, the Irish Farmers Association Dairy Committee Chair Stephen Arthur has come out this week calling on processors to support dairy farmers across the country by maximising the price they pay for April milk supplies. Now, those comments come on the back of data from the Central Statistics Office, which has confirmed that milk volumes were down by almost 6% in the month of March compared to the same month in 2023. And domestic milk intake by processors and co-ops was estimated to be around 753 million litres in March. And the data also revealed that milk volumes dipped by some 8% in the first quarter of this year against the same period in 2023. The poor weather conditions really showing, I suppose, in those figures as well, Charles. And Stephen Arthur pointed to the higher costs that are still facing farmers coming off the back of that very difficult spring weather. Thankfully, we're seeing a big improvement out there now. Animals getting out to graze, some getting out to graze day and night now in much drier farms, and it's great to see. So Stephen Arthur said we've reached the peak production now, and there's been no lift in milk volumes on farms, and that means there's going to be reduced sales for dairy farmers, which will be further compounded by the overall cost of production this spring. And he acknowledged the support that was paid by some processors last month, well, I suppose for March milk, but it needs to be extended, he said, into April to alleviate some of the cash flow pressures that dairy farmers are facing out there. And he did point to what is happening globally as well, as you said. And he said that the GDT auction from New Zealand showed an overall index increase of almost 2%, which is a positive thing. And he felt that dairy markets are firming up, and we need processors to return every cent that they can to farmers to support them during what he said is a very difficult period. And the Ornua PPI, the purchase price index as well for the month of April, and the indicative price return have both increased slightly on the March figure. So that's perhaps another positive for farmers to take, and hopefully that's something that the processors will take on board as well. And the indicative price based on the Ornua PPI for April is 38.5 cent a litre. That's up almost 1 cent a litre on the previous month's figure. Look, I suppose it's kind of a mixed picture as well, Charles. Rabobank issued a dairy markets update as well this week, and they said that the recovery in global milk prices evident in late 2023 and continuing into early this year has cooled slightly in quarter two, is what they're saying. And their latest quarterly reports suggest that the tentative recovery in prices could now face some additional headwinds. And they expected to see slow but steadier price increases for the rest of this year. So that's interesting as well in context of the global picture as well, Charles.
And just while we're on dairy, Aisling, you spoke to Pat Murphy recently, and he's the chief executive of Dairy Ireland, Kerry Group's dairy division. What kind of picture did he paint for a milk price?
Yeah, so I suppose he kind of looked at it as a steady as she goes kind of picture, really, Charles. He said that the milk supplies for Kerry are back by approximately 10% to date this year due to several factors. You know, he pointed to the deficit getting smaller, but he said overall, as things stand in 2024, they expect milk volumes to be down by between 3 and 4% for Kerry Group. And last year they were down by about 5%. So it's, you know, it is going down, the amount of milk that is being collected. He pointed to obviously weather being a factor, but equally the nitrates regulations and environmental regulations that are leading to a lot of negativity, he felt, in the dairy sector. And he said farmers aren't sure what to do next, you know, things like slurry storage, expansion of farmyards, and they're waiting to see how the whole nitrates derogation debate plays out and how the European Commission will treat Ireland when going forward when it comes to the derogation. Now, he told us that Kerry Group's milk pool has grown by about a quarter over the past decade. But in comparison to other milk processors, they have seen their milk pools increase by between 50 and 80%. And he said their ambition in Kerry was to add value to milk and to the milk that is collected and to return that to dairy farmers. And he said as we enter peak milk production months, he's anticipating that milk price will remain relatively stable. And he said milk prices today are a little bit higher than what the market is actually returning. And he said the market seems to be fairly static over the last number of weeks, and they wouldn't anticipate really a whole change in milk price over the next 3 to 6 months. And he said if it stays as it currently is, I think we'll be doing well. So that was his read of it on a global sense. And he felt that maybe in terms of Western Europe, milk supply has been relatively static over the past few months. But he feels that profitability in the region for farmers will increase over the next number of months because milk price is quite high and input costs are coming down. But he said that we might see a little bit of an increase in milk supply coming out of Europe in the second half of this year, which obviously wouldn't be a good thing for milk price. And just staying on milk suppliers and Kerry Group, we also learned from Pat Murphy this week that Kerry Group are currently drawing up a new contract for their milk suppliers. Their current contract with suppliers expires in April 2026, and Kerry Group has informed the board of Kerry Co-op that they're currently in the process of drawing up a new contract which will be available over the next couple of months. And Pat Murphy moved to reassure suppliers that they'll always pick up milk and they'll always collect milk from their suppliers in any part of the catchment area. He made those comments on the back of some calls, he said, that milk suppliers had been making to Kerry Dairy Ireland on that matter as well. And I suppose finally staying with that issue, quite adjacent to it, the Munster Dairy Producers Organisation this week, Charles, announced that once their website is up and running for online applications, they will be accepting membership. And that producer organisation, it was recently given formal recognition from the Department of Agriculture. It has been spearheaded in recent months by a group of Kerry Group milk suppliers. They participated in meetings and protests last year. They're unhappy at the price of milk being paid by Kerry Group. So this is the next step in their journey. So it'll be interesting to see what the uptake will be amongst suppliers across the Munster region for the Munster Dairy Producer Organisation.
Well, this time of year not only sees peak milk supply, it's also the time of year where we see higher volumes of calves going through the marts coming off the back of calving season. Breifne, you caught up with the manager of Castleisland Mart in Kerry to get a feel of what they're focusing on as these calves come through their gates.
Yeah, that's right, Charles. So I suppose the peak calf sales are now behind us, Castleisland Mart has been putting in a number of changes, I suppose, to streamline the calf sales during these peak weeks in the spring when numbers are at their highest. So I suppose we caught up with the Castleisland Mart manager, Neelis McAuliffe, just to find out, I suppose, how the Mart is managing with these larger numbers of calf sales, how they're, I suppose, streamlining them and running them more smoothly. He explained that a few years ago they started putting in simple things like new calf drinkers in the pens. Then 2 years ago they put in a system basically where every calf stays in the mart for as little time as possible. So they done this through putting in a booking system where farmers that are coming to the mart to sell calves can contact the mart office in advance of the sale and inform them how many calves they're coming in with. I suppose from here then Castleisland Mart then gives the farmers basically a lot number and a time to come in, and the mart manager said 95% of the time the farmers' calves are sold within the hour. So then for, I suppose, people that are buying calves, then the mart put in a computerised system where every calf buyer gets an allocated number. So as soon as the farmer buys a calf, their number comes up on a screen, and the staff working when the calves leave the sale ring, the number comes up, and the mart staff then know the corresponding pen to put the calf into. So basically every buyer will have all their calves together by the end of the sale. And the mart manager explained that this eliminates farmers having to look through pens and try and gather up their calves. I suppose when the sale is finished, then all they have to do is round up their calves, which are all in the one pen, check their tags, and they're away on the road.
Sticking with the Mart's, Breifne, you were able to confirm in the last week that Ballinakil Mart has changed ownership. Can you update us on that?
Yeah, that's right, Charles. So just last week there, Agriland revealed Ballinakil Mart in County Laois has in fact been purchased, and the new owner is James Mallon from County Meath. On Friday the 3rd of May, the new owner of the Mart was speaking to Agriland and confirmed the purchase, and basically said that his plans were for the continuation of weekly livestock sales at the Mart venue and to further grow and develop the livestock sales at the Mart. So there had been a lot of speculation over the past number of months that the Mart was to be sold, and Mallon, who is also the owner of Carnaross Mart, was interested in the purchase, but this was of course confirmed just last Friday. The new owner of the Mart also confirmed that there is plans now in place to facilitate livestock customers from Northern Ireland at Ballinakil Mart, and this will be done through facilitating export testing and clearance of livestock that are purchased at the Mart venue. So of course James Mallon is no stranger to the Mart scene in Ireland. This is the second Mart purchased by the County Meath man, and he previously purchased Carnaross Mart in County Meath in 2017.
Finally this week, after much concern over the last several months due to the weather, farmers all over the country are trying now to knuckle down and get silage season started where they can. Louise, you were on the road this week to meet farmers who got silage underway. What has been their experience of the last few months, and what are their concerns now as they get silage started?
Yes, Charles, I was on 2 farms in County Meath this week where cutting is getting underway. Field conditions have definitely dried up compared to a few weeks ago, and rainfall is expected to be well below average for the week ahead. Most soils currently have good trafficability, although there are areas in the Midlands and South that remain saturated or close to it. Of course, even for dry areas, the impact of weeks of wet conditions is going to have consequences. One of the contractors told us that a lot of farmers at the minute are out clearing up grass to be able to spread fertiliser and get a good second cut. He said that if weather remains settled for the rest of the year, that conditions may be okay. But if it doesn't, or if it becomes too dry, then the situation for fodder may worsen, as there are no stocks left on farms. Part-time farmer and contractor Des Kernion said that this is probably one of the worst years he has ever seen for continuous spells of wet weather. Here's a clip from Des.
Unfortunately, at 54, it probably is one of the worst years. I remember 85 and 86, which exactly the same. It rained for 12 months. It was terrible. And we've very similar situation here.
And Louise, with silage season starting, and after such difficult weather for so long, which made it harder for field work of all kinds to be carried out, this must be putting additional pressure on contractors.
Hearing from farmers and contractors, they are getting up and out to work at the crack of dawn until midnight some days to try and catch up on lost time, which I'm sure is not only tiring but mentally draining too. We've also seen a hike in fuel prices this year, which is putting pressure on contractors. One of the farmers told me that due to wet grounds, more fuel is actually being used, obviously with heavier loads to draw, and harder work with ploughing and tilling. Then you have rising prices of machinery on top of that. One of the contractors told us that farmers can sometimes not see the professionalism of a contractor and the amount of finance that goes into maintenance and staffing. He said that if cash flow does not improve, then it may turn younger farmers away from the job.
Thanks, Louise. And that just about brings us to the end of today's show. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share the Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Breifne, Louise and myself, have a great weekend.